I stood at the hospital billing counter with my fingers gripping the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps. My mother-in-law's voice cut through the quiet waiting area, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Real love doesn't ask about money," she announced, tilting her chin up like she was delivering a sermon. My husband, Marcus, stood beside her with his hands in his pockets, staring at the floor tiles. The nurse behind the counter shifted uncomfortably, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She cleared her throat softly and asked the question that hung in the air like smoke. "So who will be handling the payment today?" My mother-in-law, Patricia, smiled at me. It wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that said she'd already decided I'd failed some invisible test. The clerk's fingers moved to her mouse, waiting. "I'll need the cardholder's name, please," she said quietly. Patricia didn't wait for me to answer. She stepped closer to the counter, her perfume filling the small space between us. "You know, there are women who marry for love," she said, projecting her voice like an actress on stage. "And then there are women who marry for what a man can provide." Several people in the waiting area looked up from their phones. An elderly man in a wheelchair stopped mid-conversation with his daughter. I felt my face grow hot, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Marcus shifted his weight but said nothing. He wouldn't even look at me. Patricia continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I just think it's important to know what kind of woman my son married. Don't you agree?" She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to the room. The nurse looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Then the total appeared on the screen. The clerk turned the monitor slightly. $18,400. Patricia's smile faltered for just a second. I turned to Marcus, searching his face for something, support, anger, on my behalf. Anything. He finally met my eyes, and for a moment I thought he might say something. Stand up for me. Tell his mother to stop. Instead, he shrugged. Actually shrugged. "Let's just see what my mom decides," he said, his voice flat and distant. It was like being slapped. Not family, not wife, not partner, just someone waiting for his mother's judgment. I'd spent 3 years trying to earn my place in this family. 3 years of Sunday dinners where Patricia recounted stories of Avitode, Marcus's childhood sweethearts. 3 years of subtle corrections about how I dressed, spoke, cooked. And in this moment, standing in a hospital billing office, I finally understood. I was never going to be enough. Not because of who I was, but because I wasn't her. The clerk, following protocol, read the payment confirmation aloud. Payment received from account holder Thomas Rivera. Not Marcus Rivera. Not Patricia Rivera. The waiting room had gone completely silent. Even the television mounted in the corner seemed quieter. Patricia's mouth opened slightly. Marcus turned to me, confusion replacing his relief. "Who is that?" Patricia demanded, her voice sharp. She reached for the receipt, but I pulled it back. The clerk looked between us, clearly regretting reading the name aloud. Several people in the waiting room were openly staring now. One woman had her phone out, though whether she was texting or recording, I couldn't tell. Marcus touched my arm. "Whose name is that?" I looked at the receipt one more time, then folded it carefully and put it in my purse. My hands weren't shaking anymore. "He'll be fine now," I said calmly. Then I walked toward the elevator without looking back. I could hear Patricia's voice rising behind me, demanding explanations I didn't owe her. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the ground floor. As the doors began to close, I saw Marcus start toward me, but Patricia grabbed his arm. The last thing I saw was her face, red with anger and something else. Confusion, maybe fear. The elevator descended smoothly. My phone started vibrating before I reached the lobby. Text after text. Call after call. I didn't look. The doors opened to the main entrance. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and warm. I walked through the automatic doors and kept walking. Past the parking lot, past the emergency entrance, all the way to the small garden area where patients sometimes sat. I found an empty bench and finally looked at my phone. 17 missed calls. 12 texts. All from Marcus. Not one from Patricia directly, which somehow made it worse. Marcus didn't come home until after midnight. I heard his key in the lock, heard him drop his wallet on the kitchen counter like he did every night. I was sitting in the living room with the lights off, waiting. He found me there. "We need to talk," he said, flipping on the lamp. The brightness made me squint. He sat across from me, not beside me. "Who paid that bill?" he asked. His tone was careful, controlled. "Who is Thomas Rivera?" I didn't answer immediately. He leaned forward. "This is embarrassing. You understand that? My mother is upset. The whole family is asking questions. You made us look stupid. Not, thank you. No, I'm sorry she treated you that way. Just embarrassment. Concern about appearances. Why didn't you tell us? You had someone who could just cover $18,000? He pressed. I realized then what bothered him most. Not that his mother had humiliated me, but that I'd had resources he didn't know about. Power he hadn't controlled. I let him talk himself out. When he finally stopped, I started speaking. Quietly, calmly. I told him about the wedding. How his mother had pulled me aside and told me I was lucky Marcus chose me. How she'd listed all the ways I didn't measure up to his previous girlfriends. I told him about the Christmas when she gave every other woman in the family jewelry and gave me a cookbook. About the dinner parties where she introduced me as Marcus's wife, but never by name. About the constant reminders that I'd married up. That I should be grateful. I'd swallowed all of it. Smiled through it. Convinced myself it would get better. That if I just proved myself, worked harder, loved him more, she'd accept me. But tonight, standing at that counter, I'd finally seen the truth. It didn't matter what I did. She decided who I was before she met me. And Marcus had let her. "You want to know who Thomas Rivera is?" I said. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. "He's my financial advisor." The words hung in the air. I watched Marcus process this, watched his expression shift from confusion to something else. I explained it simply, the way I'd explain it to a child. For 5 years before we met, I'd worked in tech. Software development. I'd been good at it. Very good. I'd saved aggressively. Invested carefully. Built a portfolio that grew steadily while I lived below my means. When Marcus and I met, I'd already had financial security. But I'd never mentioned it. Why? Because I'd wanted to be loved for myself, not for what I had. So I'd kept working my modest administrative job, the one his mother loved to comment on. Kept driving my old car. Kept living simply. And while they assumed I had nothing, I'd quietly been building everything. The hospital bill. It was nothing compared to what I actually controlled. 3 days after the hospital incident, I overheard Patricia on the phone. I'd stopped by to pick up mail that still came to Marcus's childhood home. She didn't know I was there. Of course I paid it, she was telling someone. Probably her sister. What kind of mother would I be if I didn't help my son? Yes, the whole amount. Well, you know how it is. Some women just don't appreciate sacrifice. She went on, weaving a story where she was the hero. Where she'd stepped in at the last moment, saved the day, paid the enormous bill out of love. Not one word about Thomas Rivera. Not one mention of the truth. When I walked into the kitchen, she startled, nearly dropping her phone. But she recovered quickly, ended her call and smiled at me like nothing had happened. Marcus came home that evening and said nothing about his mother's lie, which meant he knew. He knew she was taking credit, and he was letting her. Not because of who I was, But because I wasn't her. On principle, Patricia announced suddenly, I won't be paying this bill. The words landed like stones in water. Patricia crossed her arms, her bracelet catching the light. If you loved my son properly, she said, each word carefully chosen, money wouldn't matter to you. You'd find a way. Real wives sacrifice. My hands started shaking. I pressed them against my sides, so no one would see. The nurse's expression had shifted from uncomfortable to sympathetic. She'd clearly seen family drama before, but this felt different. This felt cruel. Love isn't about dollar signs, Patricia continued. It's about dedication. Commitment, putting your husband first, no matter what. She paused, letting her words sink in. Marcus nodded slightly, like she was making perfect sense. Like I was the problem. The clerk shifted in her chair. Ma'am, we do need to process payment today before discharge. I took a breath. My voice came out quieter than I wanted. Give me a moment, please. I stepped away from the counter, moving toward the large windows that overlooked the parking lot. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. I pulled it out, my fingers surprisingly steady now. Patricia watched me with narrowed eyes, probably expecting me to call my parents, to beg them for money, to prove her point about what kind of woman I was. I scrolled through my contacts and pressed call. 2 rings. Then a familiar voice answered. It's me, I said softly. I need you to authorize a payment. I gave the hospital name, the account number, the amount. My voice cracked once, but I kept going. The conversation lasted maybe 90 seconds. When I returned to the counter, Patricia was mid-sentence, explaining to another waiting patient about young people these days. I handed my phone to the clerk. The authorization should be in your system now, I said. She typed something, waited, then nodded. Payment authorization received, she confirmed. Patricia's eyebrows drew together. She glanced at Marcus, then at me, trying to piece together what had just happened. Marcus, though, looked relieved. His shoulders relaxed. He actually smiled a little. He thought his mother had paid. I could see it in his face. Patricia caught his expression and something passed between them. An understanding. She didn't correct him. She let him believe she'd stepped in at the last moment. Let him think she'd saved the day. The printer behind the counter whirred to life. The clerk pulled out a long receipt, her eyes scanning the information. I'll need a signature here, she said, pointing to a line at the bottom. I signed. The clerk separated the pages, keeping one for the hospital file. She held out the customer copy. At the top of the page, printed in bold letters, was a name. Patricia leaned forward, squinting at the paper. Her face changed. The family dinner happened 2 weeks later. Patricia insisted. We need to reconnect, she told Marcus. Heal the family. I almost didn't go, but something told me I should. 20 people crowded around tables pushed together in Patricia's dining room. Cousins, aunts, uncles, Marcus's siblings. Midway through the meal, Patricia stood up. She tapped her wine glass with a fork, calling for attention. I want to tell you all about something that happened recently, she began. My stomach tightened. She recounted the hospital visit, painting herself as the calm, generous mother who'd stepped in when others hesitated. Some people, she said, glancing at me, don't understand what family sacrifice looks like. But I paid that bill without hesitation. That's what real love looks like. The room murmured approval. Marcus's aunt actually said, You're a saint, Patricia. Then Marcus's cousin, Dylan, turned to me. That must have been such a relief, he said. You must be so grateful. Everyone was looking at me now, waiting for me to confirm Patricia's story, to thank her publicly, to validate the lie. I set down my fork carefully, took a sip of water. Then I smiled. We'll talk about it soon, I said calmly. The room went still. Patricia's smile froze. She tried to laugh it off. What's there to talk about? I'm just glad we could help. But the air had shifted. People glanced at each other, uncertain. Something in my tone, in my expression, told them there was more to the story. Dinner continued, but the energy had changed. Conversations felt strained. Patricia kept watching me from across the table. After dessert, Marcus pulled me into the hallway. His face was tight with anger. What are you doing? He hissed. You're making everyone uncomfortable. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Am I? I asked. He grabbed my arm. Not hard, but firm. Don't you dare embarrass my mother. We stood in that hallway for a long moment. His hand on my arm. His face close to mine. She's been nothing but good to you, he said, his voice low and angry. This family welcomed you. The least you can do is show some gratitude. I pulled my arm away gently. Welcomed me? I repeated. He didn't hear himself. Couldn't hear himself. If you say anything to contradict her, he warned, we're going to have a serious problem. Do you understand me? I understood perfectly. Loyalty had conditions here, and I wasn't part of them. I would never be part of them. I understand, I said quietly. He relaxed slightly, thinking I'd agreed to stay silent. I hadn't. I just decided something else entirely. I would choose the timing. I would control the narrative. Not him. Not Patricia. Me. For the first time in 3 years, I would take my power back. The next morning, I opened my laptop. I found the hospital receipt, the payment confirmation, the transfer records. I took clear screenshots of everything. Then I opened my messages and found one specific contact. Dylan's wife, Carmen. She was a lawyer. Sharp, fair, and the one person in the family Patricia actually respected. I'd seen it at family gatherings. When Carmen spoke, Patricia listened. I sent her the screenshots with a simple message. This is what actually happened at the hospital. I thought you should know the truth. I'll let you decide what to do with it. 3 dots appeared immediately. She was typing. I'll handle it, she replied. Then, I'm sorry she did this to you. I closed my laptop and made coffee. My hands were steady. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. The truth was out of my hands now. Whatever happened next wasn't my responsibility. A week later, Patricia needed follow-up paperwork from the hospital. Something about insurance. Marcus asked if I'd go with her. I almost said no. But then I thought about timing. About opportunity. We drove in silence. At the billing office, Patricia gave them her information. The clerk pulled up the account and frowned slightly. I see this was already settled by a Thomas Rivera payment, she said, reading from her screen. Do you need a copy of that receipt? Patricia's face went pale. That's not necessary, she said quickly. But the clerk was already typing. Actually, I remember you, she said, looking at me. You were here when the payment was processed. Would you like copies of the documentation? Patricia turned to me slowly. I could see her mind working, calculating. The clerk printed several pages and handed them across the counter. Patricia snatched them, scanning the text. Her hands started shaking. Patricia confronted the staff right there. There must be a mistake, she insisted. I paid this bill. Check again. The clerk, patient but firm, pulled up the full payment history. Ma'am, the only payment on this account came from the authorization we received that day. Thomas Rivera Financial Services. It's all documented here. She pointed to the screen. Patricia couldn't see it from her angle, but I could. Every detail, date, time, amount, authorization code. No room for interpretation. No way to spin it. Everyone will know. Patricia whispered, more to herself than anyone else. She clutched the papers to her chest. We walked to the car in complete silence. She didn't speak during the drive back, but when we reached her house, she turned to me. "You planned this," she said. Her voice was shaking. "You wanted to humiliate me." I put the car in park. "No, Patricia," I said quietly. "You humiliated yourself. I just stopped covering for you." Carmen must have shared the screenshots. By that evening, the family group chat was exploding. I'd been removed from it months ago, but Marcus was still in it. I watched him scroll through message after message, his face growing redder. Someone had posted the receipts. Someone else had asked Patricia directly if she'd lied. Marcus's brother had written, "Why would you make up something like this?" Patricia tried to control the damage. She sent voice messages explaining she'd misremembered, that she'd intended to pay but someone else had stepped in, that it was all a misunderstanding, that the screenshots didn't lie, the payment records didn't lie, the timeline didn't lie. Within hours, the entire family knew the truth. Patricia hadn't paid anything. She'd taken credit for someone else's generosity. And worse, she'd used it to shame me publicly. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Just 2 words. "Call me." I didn't call. 20 minutes later, he called me. I answered on the 4th ring. "This is a disaster," he said. "No hello, no how are you? My mother is devastated. The whole family is talking. You need to fix this." I almost laughed. "Fix it?" I repeated. "You need to tell them it was a misunderstanding. That you never told her someone else paid. That she just assumed." He was giving me a script. Building me an out. For her. "I'm sorry," he said. And for a second I thought he meant it. "I'm sorry we got caught off guard like this. I didn't know you had these resources. You should have told me. Not sorry for the humiliation. Not sorry his mother lied. Not sorry he'd stood silent while I was publicly shamed. Sorry he'd been caught off guard. Sorry I'd had secrets. Sorry he'd lost control." I felt nothing. Just calm, clear nothing. "I'm done, Marcus," I said. The line went quiet. "Done with what?" he asked carefully. "Explaining my worth to people who've already decided I have none. Proving myself to your mother. Waiting for you to choose me over her." He started to argue. I talked over him. Love that needs proof isn't love. Respect that needs to be earned from people who've decided you're worthless isn't respect. "I can't do this anymore." "You're being dramatic," he said. "We can work through this." "No," I said simply. "We can't." I told him I'd pack a bag. That I'd stay somewhere else while we figured out the details. He tried to make it about his mother. About the family. About embarrassment and optics and what people would think. I hung up while he was mid-sentence. Then I pulled my suitcase from the closet and started filling it with things that mattered. Patricia called the next morning. I almost didn't answer, but I was curious what she'd say when it was just the 2 of us. No audience. No performance. "You've destroyed this family," she said. Her voice was tight, controlled, angry. I said nothing. "Are you happy now? My son is a mess. Everyone thinks I'm a liar. Was this your plan all along?" I let her talk. Let her rage. Let her blame. Then, quietly, "I only wanted you to treat me with basic respect." Silence. Then her voice changed. Softer. Almost pleading. "We didn't know you had money. If we'd known, things would have been different." And there it was. "You didn't know me," I said. "You never wanted to." I hung up. Then I blocked her number. I blocked Marcus's mother, his sister, his aunt. Anyone who'd watched me be humiliated and said nothing. My phone felt lighter immediately. She sent one final message before I blocked her. It came through email. Subject line: "The truth about love." I opened it against my better judgment. Inside, a long rambling explanation about how she'd only wanted the best for her son. How she'd worried I wasn't right for him. How money had never mattered to her. Only character. "We didn't know you had money," she wrote again. As if that was the point. As if having resources would have made me worthy of basic human decency. I read it twice. Then I typed a response. Just one line. "You didn't know me. You never asked." I hit send. Then I went into my email settings and blocked her there too. No more access. No more chances to explain. No more opportunities to rewrite history. She'd had years to know me. She'd chosen not to. That wasn't my failure. It was hers. 3 months passed. I found a small apartment across town. Quiet. Bright. Mine. I went back to work in tech, taking a position I'd been offered twice before. The pay was triple what I'd been making. I reconnected with old friends. Started running again. Read books that had been sitting on my shelf for years. Life stabilized in a way it hadn't in a long time. No Sunday dinners where I braced for insults. No second-guessing my clothes, my words, my worth. No walking on eggshells around people who decided I'd never measure up. Just peace. Simple, quiet, boring peace. The divorce papers came and went. Marcus tried to contest things, then gave up when he realized I had documentation of everything. One afternoon, I ran into Dylan and Carmen at the grocery store. Dylan looked uncomfortable. Carmen smiled warmly. "How are you doing?" Carmen asked, genuine concern in her voice. I told her I was good. Really good. Dylan shuffled his feet, then spoke. "My mother still tells people love isn't about money," he said. He looked embarrassed. "She says it at family dinners. Like some kind of motto." I smiled. Not bitter. Not angry. Just amused. "That's interesting," I said. Carmen shook her head. "She doesn't get it. She probably never will." We talked for a few more minutes. Normal things. Weather. Work. Plans for the summer. When we parted ways, I felt light. Free. I drove home thinking about Patricia's motto. About how she'd weaponized it against me. About how she'd used it to justify cruelty. And I thought about the irony. Love wasn't about money to her. Until it was. Until she realized I had it. Until she understood I'd never needed them the way they'd assumed. Funny how it only mattered when she didn't have.